So, welcome back to I'm Still Here. This is Heather. Larry is off on a different adventure today, but I brought my friends Katie and Chris back, and we're going to talk a little bit about living with cancer and dealing with fear. And I thought maybe we would just start by if you guys could introduce yourselves again and remind people kind of how long you've been dealing with cancer, and maybe what treatment you're on. Chris, do you want to start?
Sure. Chris Stark, and it'll be 6 years next week that I've been stage four. And I am on a clinical trial. Couldn't even tell you the drug company because it was one I'd never heard of. And it
Perfect.
doesn't have a name. It's just some big long scientific number. So,
Mhm.
but it's an IV clinical trial and it's working well so far.
And you've been metastatic for how long?
6 years.
6 years. Katie?
I'm Katie Edick, and I was 6 years in October, and I'm currently still on first line treatment, Herceptin, Perjeta, and oral tamoxifen.
Okay. Katie, we all kind of chat a little bit, every so often. Katie just got through all of her testing again, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But oh, that's always such a time of
Yeah, skin
anxiety.
anxiety is real. It
It
is.
is.
Every year I think, oh, it's going to get easier, or I'm not going to freak out this time. But then as it looms, you just like your
Yeah.
brain starts going.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I was actually talking to somebody the other day and I said I try not to do stuff like this time period, like kind of Thanksgiving to through the holidays, because well, maybe part of it is trauma from being diagnosed initially during that time, but part of it too is just like you really want to stay in the moment, but it's so hard when you know that you've got this test out there, something could change, right? I don't know. I kind of preferred, I think, at this point to bury my head in the sand for a little bit and just try to stay in the moment.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I was supposed to have them all done in October. So in my brain, then it would all be set with whatever before the holidays. But of course, insurance companies are so lovely
Yeah.
that I didn't even get my scans until, November.
Yeah.
So
And like Chris, are you on a schedule for scanning with your trial?
I am. I'm actually scanned every 6 weeks because of
Okay.
the trial, so it's a little much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just
Yeah. So
mhm,
I mean, we can't always, that window is what it is, but it is
mhm,
a challenge, I think, to try to kind of live between those two things.
mhm.
So I wanted to talk to you guys about like really living with cancer, and it kind of seems so broad, but I get so many questions that are just like, how do you do this every day? And then I have to think back and remind myself, like, I remember thinking there will never be a day that I don't like focus on cancer. That will never happen, you know. And for me, I have been able to, get to those days, but I do remember them. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on what do you think about that? How do you think about cancer?
For me, it's definitely not something I forget about. I mean, I think every day there's some kind of reminder,
Sure.
whether it's an ache or pain, and you
Yeah.
wonder what's happening,
Hmm.
or just it not feeling well, or I'm adventurous and I always plan adventures and things for the future, but then it always lingers on my head, like when it's time to buy trip insurance or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
so there's always reminders somehow, some way.
Hmm.
yeah, I agree. You never forget about it. It's always there. And you can be in the moment and having a great time, and the weirdest things will trigger it. And you'll be
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I'm still living with this, or, the simple thing is a headache. Is it cancer in my brain? So we have such a different, perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that it's it's terminal, and you don't know how that's gonna affect you, and all three of us, our journeys are so different, and so there is no roadmap on
Mhm.
what it's going to look like.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think too, it is. I don't think people, unless you've been diagnosed, can understand really. Um, the smallest things can trigger you thinking about cancer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really sentimental things, and sometimes it is like physical things. I mean, I was 26 when I was diagnosed, so literally I've almost lived half of my life with cancer, and so, but I don't remember the days of being able to think, oh, a headache's just a headache, without, I mean,
Right.
much better at going, like, listen, this is sinus. You've had sinus issues forever. But like with cancer, it just is so amplified, I think. So how do you talk yourself, I don't want to say down, but how do you talk yourself back into life, or don't you? Or what works for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, just staying positive is a big help for me. And while those thoughts linger in the back of my mind, I try not to be voiceful about them. I try not to, and maybe that's good or bad, but I don't typically share my
Mhm.
aches and pains that worry me,
Yeah.
just because I don't want it to consume me. And I feel like the more I talk about it, the more it might consume me.
Hmm.
So I often just pretend like everything's great, which
Okay.
it is. I mean, for the most part, things are great, but
Well, so you're talking about perspective right there, in terms of, if I'm up and about and able to do, like, we were talking about our plans for the day, then everything's great, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the times it's a choice you make. So,
Hmm.
I think from the beginning, I've always said I choose joy, but that's why it's not I'm joyful.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has to be a very intentional choice of I'm choosing to be joyful,
Mhm.
even despite, with the aches and pains,
Yeah.
and I think all depending on where I'm at mentally and frame of my life depends on, I think, how I protect myself. So I'm in a lot of stage 4 Facebook groups, and there are some weeks where I'm reading them and I'm responding and I'm just in the thick of it. And then there's other times where I silence them or I
Yes.
quickly scan over them because I'm just not in the right frame of mind to be in that space. And so I think
Mhm.
that sometimes you have to protect yourself.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
I agree. I will say sometimes for me it's easier to voice kind of the ache or the pain, because sometimes I feel like that just helps it go away. Or
Right.
I mean, my husband's pretty good about, like, listen, that's a 50-year-old thing, or that's a whatever it is. My dog will not settle down. Ugh. Anyway, it does sometimes help me go, oh, wait a second. Or I feel like even just putting it out there sometimes makes it go away. So it's interesting how we all have to kind of deal with those things differently. But I think the what's true for all of us is that you don't have any symptom that doesn't go immediately to cancer. Like everything is, how is this related to cancer, and could this be something that can change my life, right? So
Yeah. And so I think it's almost like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, yes,
Right.
same line treatment, 6 years. It doesn't get any easier because you're waiting for when it's going to happen. Because
Yeah.
you've seen too many friends, that were doing great and they're no longer here. And so
yeah.
it's not like it's something that's far away, like removed from us. We're,
Hmm. Hmm.
we've known people.
Yeah. And I will say, like, being as far out as I am finally farther away. But I think that's the other thing when I talk to people who are early diagnosed. I mean, they want it to get better, like this feeling to get better in the first few months or even in the first few years. And it doesn't happen. Like this stress and anxiety over what's coming, it's not something that's quickly resolved, right? And it is something that we have to work on, I think, forever, in terms of how do we handle these things. So
Yeah, it's definitely like it's a grieving process. I
For
think it's
sure.
funny. I can remember Anna's always loved the movie Mamma Mia, and watching it with her and some of the scenes I used to sob. You know,
Yeah.
I even wrote a blog about it, but I took her to see Mamma Mia at a local high school doing it, and I was able to watch it without having like such a physical response. And so then
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I am healing, or I am at least finding ways to not live with such deep grief, or like
Yeah.
where I'm so emotional.
Right.
I think you guys can all, I know you can all relate, like, part of the grieving process is like all the milestones in your children's life that you're
Mhm.
like, are we going to be here for that? And we're all experiencing. Katie, you have a senior, you've got to have or kids graduate from college, and
Yeah.
like I have one that's going to graduate in the next year from college, and my other one is in college now, and those are days I remember being diagnosed thinking
I'm not gonna see.
I'm not going to
I
see that.
know.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
Heather,
think
you probably didn't know if
that.
you'd see kindergarten,
I didn't. I mean, that was my first goal, was kindergarten,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's so emotional. And I think when you were talking, Katie, about like the play, I remember I love to read, and I read a lot of fiction. But when I was first diagnosed and I was looking to kind of, get out of my head for a little bit, I swear every book, what's the best storyline? Somebody with
Right.
cancer. And I was like, I can't get away from this. And I can't, even if from a fictional level, I couldn't read it,
Mhm.
just,
Yeah, it's still triggering because Drew was like, "Hey, let's sit down and watch Thor," because he's the Marvel movie one, and the
oh,
most recent Thor movie, the main character. I mean, I got spoiler alert, but
yeah. Don't worry, I don't watch Thor.
You're good.
no, but she has cancer, and I was
Oh,
like, "What the heck?
Right.
Come on!"
Yeah.
I know. I was going to say too, though, the reality of that, when we think about the aches and pains, is those aren't necessarily the things that trigger, right? It
Mhm.
has advanced, So I think we're always like trying to be alert for what might change things, but ultimately it is a scan that shows something that maybe you didn't feel. And Chris, I think maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've had progression, well, my original diagnosis and then progression 3 times, and I've never once had a symptom that
Yeah.
even it's always been my scans.
Yeah,
So it is. And I think that's why the scanxiety is so real, because
for sure.
sometimes that's what our only knowledge.
Yeah.
And when I
Mhm.
hear you say that, Chris, because I think you play games with yourself. So, like going to scans, you're like, why am I anxious? I don't feel different. So everything has to be okay. But then people like you, Chris, and you're like, but she's never felt anything. So,
Right.
I mean, that it is so nerve-wracking because
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Mhm.
think the hyper awareness too, when you're doing a scan and you're watching the tech and you're trying to like, are they acting a little differently? Did they, like, I used to have it more with the bone scans where they would be like, just a second, we need to go check it. And I'd be like, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, and then sometimes they'd say, we need one more view. And I'd be like, done. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is it. So,
I always feel like I know based on when it goes in my portal. If it's in
yeah.
my portal within 2 hours, I'm good. If it's 24, things are not good.
Yeah. Oh
Yes,
my
it
gosh.
happened to me. Yeah, the CAT scan popped in first, and so then that one looked okay, and I was waiting and waiting, and the bone wasn't coming, and same thing, Chris, like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And then I even called the office. I'm like, what's going on? You guys know I can read this. Don't be withholding it. And
Right.
he's like, nope, it hasn't been read
Yeah.
yet, so you're fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just read it.
Right.
Right. And literally it could be, hey, that guy got, in a whatever, he didn't get to work on time today, or
Right.
whatever, or they had a meeting, or none of that is a consideration when you're waiting on results, right?
Right.
Right.
Like, no, this is all that matters. Uh, do you have do you have some things that you say to yourself to kind of calm that fear? Like some statements that you um kind of counteract fear with, I know for me, like from a physical standpoint, like it always would be helpful for me to go, an ache or a pain, like, no, that's from this. I have to, like, I'll really try to stop myself and say, no, that isn't necessarily cancer. That's from doing this. Or you know,
Yeah, so I'm going through that right now as my lower back has been hurting for the last day and a half while I hauled my artificial Christmas tree up the stairs by myself, and I, like, keep going
yeah,
over and over in my head. It was the Christmas tree. It was the
yeah,
Christmas tree.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of mine sometimes can be that mental game or
yeah.
just getting into a funk. And so then I just try and tell myself, like, faith over fear.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm,
there's
mhm.
nothing, like there's nothing I could do in this moment to change it. The only thing
Yeah,
I can do is change how I'm feeling.
yeah.
So then I try and do something to like occupy my time or, think about how far I've come. Um,
Mhm,
yeah. So, I always I mean, Laura McGregor, the founder of Hope
mhm,
Scarves, I mean, one of her biggest things she always said, especially closer to the end of her life, was she always held fear and hope in the same hand. And so I
mhm.
think that that's
Mhm.
what I think a lot about is that it's always, it is fear and hope, fear
Yeah.
and joy. It's not
Mhm.
or you
Yes.
have both.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. I find myself praying a lot when I'm feeling anxious or have those pains. I just surrender it all and find
Mhm,
myself in prayer.
mhm. I like to write, so I've also
Mhm.
noticed too, just to just to be able to do kind of a dump in terms of, it's
Mhm.
amazing how words on a paper kind of release them from your brain, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
It's
um
almost like what they say, you name it to tame it, it's like
yeah,
you're getting it
Yeah.
out there, and
yeah,
then sometimes you can just shut the book, and then metaphorically, you hope you can, like, kinda keep
right,
that
right.
door in your brain for a little while.
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
something else emerges in terms of maybe a statement that you hadn't thought about, or something that goes, oh, well, maybe it's just this, after all of that. So it's, I don't know. I think having those, um, and being willing to do it again and again and again, right? Having things that help you and realizing it's not one and done, right? How many times do you have to go back
Mhm.
Yeah,
and really think about, you know, what's my brain doing right now?
Mhm.
and I think
So,
that's I don't know, why I do some of the things I do. I just try and find purpose for why this is my life.
I'm always negotiating with my doctor because in a clinical trial, you're seeing like ridiculously amounts of
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And so I always have to get permission from him to, skip a blood draw because I want to go somewhere. And so after my last scan, he's like, you are my star patient. He's like, you're always finding ways to still live your life. Like this treatment's working great for you. You always come in so happy. And I just think, while we definitely have fear and we have sad moments, mindset just plays a lot in how our days actually go.
Well, and I guess I feel like with that like, I don't, it's not a win lose, but cancer is winning if it's impacting every part of my day while I'm here, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, so in that respect, I love that, Chris, and it's so awesome. Get busy living. That's so awesome
Yes.
to hear that, and it reminds me too to do that. But one of the other things I'd say is, that's I think that something that people don't necessarily know is you can work with your doctors on things, like it
Right.
doesn't, we feel we're the ones that we get diagnosed and we get a treatment and we're like, we got to do this, and we can't be an hour late for something, and we can't. Yes, you can. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I was on Ibrance and Faslodex, and I took Faslodex as a injection. And the first one I was going to miss because it was high school spring break and we wanted to go on
yeah,
vacation. And I remember being so nervous asking
yeah,
my doctor about that. And she's like, in the whole scheme of your life, you pushing that back a week is going to have no difference.
I know.
But I just needed to be told that because
Yeah.
in my mind, I've got to follow the schedule or things aren't going to work well. And
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first few years we always planned every vacation around my every 3-week infusions.
Yeah.
And now, sometimes I'll move it up a day or back a day. And one time I had to like skip a whole week.
Yeah.
And you get anxious, but then you realize like it's okay.
Right.
yeah, and here you skipped a week and you're still on your first line treatment 6 years
Yeah.
later. So
Yeah. No, I've been, with my Fossildex, I'm like that too, because Christmas in Florida is a non-negotiable for me. So
right.
it sometimes has to go a week, and they don't generally like to go early. So sometimes it goes late.
Yeah.
And again, I think you just have to manage the anxiety of that and go, yep, it's okay, and like, do you think I don't know. I think part of it too, though, is we get so used to knowing kind of what cancer drugs do, and they talk about timelines all the time that you kind of feel like it does, like, oh, it's empty today, right?
Right.
So
Right.
now you know,
Yeah.
it does make
Right. But then aren't you? Because I know, we're both occupational therapists. Then I'm like, I better research what the time, how long it stays in the body, that time release, and what the after, then I'm trying to find it.
we are not the same in that respect.
You don't do that?
No, God, no. I'm like a big picture person. I don't want to know any of that kind of stuff. I don't care. Yeah, I am much more of a gut intuition type of
Okay.
person than a head figure it all out.
Yeah. No, I'm always like, what is the half-life of that drug? So that if I did skip it, then I know it's still working.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing. I mean, based on this is going to sound great, but based on all of my issues with the ONJ, let's talk about half-life and the fact that maybe that Zometa was a little bit of an overkill in terms of
Right.
half-life, right? I mean, it's finally just settling down. I stopped Zometa in 2013. Like, it's been 9 years.
Yeah.
How long were you on it?
I was on it for a long time, since 1999.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but
Okay.
we were tapering, but still, even that, it was like, my gosh, and again, I get it. All people react differently to those things, but sometimes in the medical thing, I think we might go a little, more than we need to. So,
I always found, because when I tell like the dentist or other people about like, we need to make sure we're watching for this, a lot of them just don't even know what it is
they
or
have
how,
no idea.
or how that is what perplexes me.
Yeah, honestly, I'm in a group for osteonecrosis of the jaw on Facebook, and I would say there's a handful of oral surgeons in the country that really understand it. Like, it's not much, and unfortunately, I feel like a lot of dentists or even oral surgeons that are a little more local, just they know enough to be dangerous and to kind of go, oh, don't worry about it, and that's a little scary too. But also knowing what I know from my experience with osteonecrosis of the jaw is there wouldn't have been a way to slow it down. Like, it just, when it moves, so you're just really dealing with the effects of it. So I would hope that really from the treatment or the dosage part of it, that's where we need to really be paying attention is, to prevent it from happening.
Right. And your oncologist understanding it, because I'm on Xgeva, which is in the kind of the same realm as
Yep.
Zometa, and I was getting, it's supposed to be 4 weeks, but I from the beginning put it 6, so it coordinated my infusions, and then I just asked them to move to quarterly.
Yeah.
Because I've been on it so long and I know your story. And
Yes.
I think that's what's awesome. One of the good things about social media and social connections is you hear the story, so at least you have a foundation to have that conversation and say, things are out there happening. I don't want them to happen to me.
Right.
Like, and I know some ladies 6 years that they're like, you should only have that shot every year,
Yeah.
like.
I was down to 1 time a year.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, it is one of those things too, that like when I was diagnosed and I was so young, my oncologist was like, I'm going to throw everything at you I can, and frankly, it wasn't thinking about my quality of life 24 years later. Right.
Right. Because that wasn't going to happen. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. It is. That's a balance game, quality of life
yeah.
and side effects. I
Yeah.
bet,
Mhm,
Chris, that you probably think about that a lot, especially each time you
mhm.
start a new trial about,
Yeah,
having to weigh, is this working? But I feel like
right.
shit, do I keep doing this?
Yeah. Jeff and I talk about that all the time. One of the clinical trials out there that I didn't end up qualifying for it only because they couldn't biopsy my newest growth. It was just
Mhm.
in an area that wasn't safe. Um, had some really major side effects. Like you during your 3 hour infusion, you had to wear cold compresses on your eyes because corneal edema, and people in this trial were temporarily losing their vision because of the swelling. And I'm like, I said to my husband, "Is that worth it? Like,
Yeah.
do I want to try this trial? Like, I don't feel like I'm at that point, you know."
Yeah.
So it's kind of a blessing when I didn't qualify for it because I like this trial much better.
And you wouldn't have to make that decision because that is a hard decision of
Yeah.
quality of life versus being here for your family, for your kids.
Mhm.
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 So your concession for this one is that now you are using an electric bike, which looked super sweet.
It was so fun, yes. It
Yeah.
was
I'm
super
so
fun.
that is awesome. Now I'm kind of jealous and I think I need one.
They're really cool. They're game changer.
Yeah.
They're a game changer for sure.
What
Yeah.
I
I
like
bet.
about it, Chris, when I read that for you, like that you had done that, it almost helps me and probably other women, like gives us permission. I think I'm always trying
Mhm.
to do everything how I've always done it versus
Mhm.
accommodations because
Right.
I feel guilty or I blame myself that I can't do it. Like it's my
Mhm.
like fault instead of being like it's the cancer, it's the side effects. Like why
Mhm.
Mhm.
beat yourself up? And so I
Right.
appreciate when you do that, thinking like, duh, why have I held back? Like why haven't I done that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, we have to get to a place where it's okay to
Yes.
make those
Well, and
changes.
it gives you then this ability to be with your family, right with them,
Mhm.
not watching
Right.
from the sidelines, not, any of that. You get to be right with them. So if you can make that accommodation, that's great. I definitely have to make some cardiac accommodations. I just, Herceptin was not great for me in my heart, and even though my EF has recovered, I haven't recovered. And part of it, I can be in better shape. I can beat myself up about that too. But it's also like my heart rate it just goes. And so, how do you accommodate that? And what can you do? I'm not going to be climbing mountains.
Right.
Even we love like Denver area. And I'm like, yeah, altitude's not really my friend, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think, I remember when I was first diagnosed, I was like, why was I always so mad at myself for being overweight or upset about it? Like, I would give anything for that to be the only thing wrong with me,
yeah.
but then
Mhm.
once you get used to cancer, those old mindsets creep
They
in. And so I'm
do.
always like, is this a cancer or is it because I'm carrying extra pounds? And
Mhm.
I'm like, why am I beating myself up over that again? It's like
Mhm.
women. I think that's the hard part about having cancer is then we're still dealing with those other issues.
Yeah, but those are the
Nasty
things
ones.
too that I also think so strongly about. I think about it more for cancer than the other things, but like if we're going to beat ourselves up also on top of the fact that say we're doing something, whatever, I drink alcohol, right? I do some, and people, oh, that's not good. If I'm going to do that and beat myself up about it, I feel like it's a double whammy for me. So
Mhm.
no, I'm going to enjoy the drinks when I have them. I don't drink all the time. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say, this is the life that I want. You know
Yes.
what I
Mhm.
mean? These are the
Yeah.
things that it does make me happy to be able to socially drink. I'm going to do that. And I'm not going to give in to that guilt. Like,
Right.
It's
There's plenty of people out there that don't drink any alcohol. They eat the
yes,
best diet you're supposed to, and they still die from stage 4
yes.
breast cancer.
Well, and again, like this blame game is intense, right? I mean, it starts, I cannot, the whole they lost their battle with cancer, which when I'm feeling snarky, I'll be like, I'll make a comment, but you can't generally do that when somebody just died. But I'm like, who lost their battle with heart disease or COPD? Like, stop it, right?
Right.
But quit blaming me. For this diagnosis, this disease that I have to live with. It's hard enough, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you can see sometimes you see people looking at you or judging you, like, and it's like, whatever, you're not judging my husband for having a beer,
Yeah.
I,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. I think it's just society and
It
us.
is.
And I think us as women, we're just extra hard on ourselves and we just don't ever give ourselves a break, even though we have a lot on our plates.
Yeah.
And nobody, for me at least, nobody's forced, like, my husband's super supportive. It's all me. I'm the
Oh, sure.
hardest person on my on myself.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you guys have some plans today. I would like to maybe make this a more regular thing. Um, it definitely, I think, is a good thing for people just to be able to hear us chatting about cancer. Um, Tell me one thing you guys are looking forward to for the holidays.
Mm.
My kids being home from college.
Yay!
Aw, I bet you that is gonna be awesome.
Mm,
What am I
Mhm.
looking forward to? Probably just all the little traditions,
okay.
and just having family together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Chris, I realized when my kids were both gone that when they come home and the shoes are on the rug in front of the front door, I'm like, oh, that's such a great feeling
I
when
know.
when the rug's full of shoes again. And
Yeah. It's
yeah,
fun.
I'm looking forward to, I think I am going to do a little decorating and stuff. I actually am wrapping up my travel assignment, so I'm going to be home for a few weeks. So at first I don't know. I think I'm just going to jump in this year and try to enjoy the little things. So
Yeah,
Awesome.
for sure.
yeah. So thanks so much for joining me this
Yeah.
morning, having a little coffee and talking about cancer. And I hope we can do it again soon. And I hope everybody who is listening in got something great from it. So
Thanks for
I'll talk
having
to
me.
you later.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Heather.